You're standing in a temple courtyard on the banks of the Nile. It's dawn. The priests are already moving, and the air is thick, not with wood smoke, but with something sweeter, heavier, curling up off a small bronze bowl toward a painted ceiling of stars. This isn't an accident. This isn't someone burning trash to keep warm. This is scheduled. This happens every single morning at the exact same hour, and it has happened every morning for thousands of years before you were born. This is the story of when ancient Egypt started smoking. And I don't mean cigarettes. I mean the actual, documented, sometimes shockingly modern-sounding practice of Egyptians deliberately inhaling smoke. For religion, for medicine, and possibly for the same reason anyone's ever done it. Because it felt like something. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about ancient Egypt. We picture pyramids, mummies, gold masks. We don't picture a civilization that ran on smoke the way we run on coffee. But that's basically what the evidence shows. Let's start with the obvious one. Incense. In Egyptian temples, burning incense wasn't occasional. It was infrastructure. Priests followed a strict daily schedule. Frankincense burned in the morning, myrrh at midday, and in the evening, a special compound blend called kifi. 3 separate, scheduled smoke offerings, every day, in every major temple, for the entire span of Egyptian civilization. That's not a ritual. That's a system. And kifi wasn't just for the gods. This is where it gets interesting. Egyptian physicians actually prescribed kifi as medicine, as a breath freshener, and, more strikingly, as a treatment for asthma. Think about that. Thousands of years before inhalers existed, Egyptian doctors were treating a respiratory condition by having patients breathe in smoke. That sounds insane until you remember we still treat lungs by putting things directly into them today. The delivery method survived. The ingredients changed. Now here's the question that should be sitting in the back of your mind. Was any of this actually psychoactive? Was anyone in ancient Egypt getting high, not just spiritually elevated? The answer is yes, and the evidence is stranger than you'd expect. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical documents on Earth, dating to around 1550 BCE, describes using opium therapeutically, including, according to some readings, to calm children who cried too much. And this wasn't a one-off mention. Archaeologists found an alabaster vessel containing opium residue in the tomb of Ka, an architect who lived during the reign of Amenhotep III. This was a real substance, used by real people, sitting quietly in a tomb for over 3,000 years, waiting for someone to test it. And it doesn't stop at opium. In the 1990s, a series of toxicology studies on Egyptian mummies, including the remains of Ramses the Great himself, found traces of THC, the psychoactive compound in cannabis, almost certainly absorbed through cannabis smoke. A pharaoh. Not a peasant, not a random burial, one of the most powerful men who ever lived, with cannabis residue in his remains. And then there's the part of this story that turned into a genuine scientific scandal. In 1992, a forensic toxicologist named Svetla Balabanova tested hair from a mummy called Hennet Tawi and found something that should not have been possible: traces of nicotine and cocaine. Substances that come from tobacco and coca plants, plants that, as far as we've ever known, only grew in the Americas thousands of years before anyone crossed the Atlantic. The finding was so strange that academics didn't know what to do with it. Some assumed contamination. Some questioned whether the mummy was even genuinely ancient. Nobody has fully closed the case. It's one of the strangest open questions in Egyptology, and it's still debated today. Let's talk about the plant Egypt did unquestionably have: the blue lotus. Ancient depictions across Egyptian art repeatedly show people holding or inhaling this flower, and modern researchers believe it had a real, mild psychoactive effect. Some scholars connect it directly to the Greek myth of the lotus eaters, people who ate a narcotic flower in North Africa and forgot their way home entirely. Myth on one side, a real flower and real chemistry on the other. So why does any of this matter? Because it means ancient Egypt wasn't just performing symbolic gestures with smoke. Between opium, cannabis, and the blue lotus, there's a real, physical case that Egyptians were deliberately altering consciousness, through medicine, through ritual and quite possibly through simple pleasure thousands of years before anyone wrote the word drug. And here's the uncomfortable turn, the same one that shows up in almost every one of these stories. What started as sacred, incense offered to gods, opium calming a sick child, kifi treating a struggling lung, eventually gets stripped of all of that meaning. In modern Egypt, the same country that once scheduled its entire religious life around smoke now has one of the highest substance abuse rates in the region, driven largely by synthetic and pharmaceutical drugs completely disconnected from any of that original context. The thread didn't break. It just got rerouted somewhere darker. So, when did ancient Egyptians start smoking? The honest answer, earlier and more deliberately than most people assume. Not as a habit picked up by accident, but as medicine, as religion, and quite possibly as one of the oldest forms of altered experience deliberately built into daily life. Go back to that temple courtyard at dawn. That smoke rising off the bronze bowl wasn't just for the gods watching from somewhere above. It was medicine. It was ritual. It was, in its own way, one of the very first attempts by human beings to reach into their own minds and change something on purpose. They just did it 3,000 years before anyone thought to write it down.